Hello everyone. In this video we're going to be taking on a beautiful project. This is an original Thomas Edison bipolar motor, and this motor dates from around 1898, 1899. One way that you could date these is by looking whether or not they feature ball bearings. This was a primitive form of ball bearings, and this came on some of the slightly later models. The earlier ones didn't have that. Anyways, it's what we call a bipolar because you see the two coils right there, and it looks like it was originally part of a small piston, like a little air pump or something like that. They did use these commonly for fans and things like that where they were supplied battery power, but this one looks like it was configured for like a little piston pump, something along those lines. But anyways, what I'll probably do is when we clean this up, I'll probably take this part off of it and just leave it, in the box next to the motor, but we'll just keep the motor itself running. And it looks like it has like a Japanning type finish on there, and there is some gold details on there. We're going to clean this motor and we're going to do like a conservation on it. It's a beautiful and it's a rare piece. There's a lot of people out there who collect Thomas Edison stuff, and it just so happens that I live right down the street from Thomas Edison's house where he lived in Florida. I live not far away from it. I've been to it numerous times. It's a beautiful place. And, I'm well aware of the debate between Edison and Tesla and all of that, but that's beyond the scope of this video. What we're trying to do is we're trying to preserve this beautiful piece of history, and I hope that you're going to enjoy following along with it.
Let me give this a spin so you can take a better look at it. So one thing that's important to note on these is this particular motor features 12 Pachinatti rings. They did make an earlier 6-ring design. This 12 ring I believe came out in like 1898 or so, around the same time that they switched over to these ball bearings. And this particular motor has a stamped tag without a serial number on it, and it does not have the cast tag, which would have been slightly earlier. And another thing about it is, if you look over here, it's almost worn away, but you can see the remnants of where Thomas Edison's signature was painted in gold on here. One thing that's unusual about this one is the signature is painted, if you're looking at the motor from the front, the signature is painted on the left side of the motor when viewed from the front, whereas on most of them it was painted on the other side behind the coil wire. So that's kind of interesting. And another thing to note about this motor is the shaft on this one is threaded, and a lot of times for the fans they weren't. As I mentioned before, this looks original. This setup for the piston pump does look original. Thomas Edison did manufacture parts for medical supplies and things like that. He didn't only make fans, he made a lot of different things. And the way that this is constructed and the quality of that construction, I firmly believe that that's all original. I don't think that that's something that was altered after the fact. So anyways, the motor appears to be mostly intact. One thing that is a problem is we're missing one brush right here. Okay, that thing is snapped off right there. So we'll have to pull the other brush out, and we'll get our micrometer out and take some measurements and see what kind of material we need, and we'll have to fabricate a new brush for that side. So let's start taking this thing apart. Like any project, I've already taken some photos of it, and we're going to take our time on it and do a thorough job on it. I forgot to mention that a lot of these C-frames that were designated for shipment overseas had holes drilled in the feet, whereas the ones that stayed in this country didn't. But my instinct tells me that the reason why this motor has the holes drilled in the feet is not because it was going overseas, but that was so that it could be secured to a bench or table to counteract the vibration that the oscillating piston would have caused. So at least that's what my instinct is telling me on that one. So I got this unscrewed just using a spanner wrench. I'm not sure exactly how these bearings are secured in here. I'll put this little magnetic bowl underneath here in case they go flying out. I've never taken one of these apart before, so we're on a crash course here as usual. Okay, good. So the bearings are secured inside of there. Well, not really. They're just kind of floating around in there. That's it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of them. At least we didn't lose any of them. Okay. Let's see if we can get this off without breaking anything. Okay, it is pinned. There's that. There it is right there. Now let's get these brush holder assemblies off of there. Okay, this armature should just pull out of here at this point. Be real careful not to damage those windings. This thing's 125 years old. Okay, we lost one bearing. It's still there on the bench. There's our armature. Nicely made piece. Put that on the side. Let's reclaim our bearing before it disappears, and I'll get in there with the tweezers and take those other bearings out of there. Okay, I got the rest of the terminal nuts off of both of those. They just unscrewed. Nothing major there. Now, this tripod base is held on with a large screw, which I'm going to attempt to remove right now, and hopefully this thing ain't rusted in the position here. And we got some movement out of it here. Okay, that's not too bad there. There it is. It's rusted, but it came out okay. I was just checking our main coils and they seem to be okay. Now I'm going to check the armature. I'm going to check each segment of the armature and make sure that there's no broken leads on that. Alright, we're going to check the armature. And we want to check and we want to confirm that we have continuity between all those segments. Okay, that armature is good. Now, it is possible to disassemble the armature further by taking off this bracket, but there's no benefit in doing that because by taking off this bracket, this is more vulnerable to damage over here. So the risk of damage is not worth any reward that you would get by taking that off. So we're just going to clean up this armature with that bracket remaining intact, and that'll keep that nice and solid so that we don't damage any of those delicate wires over there. So our coil and our armature is good. Alright, here's the motor completely broken down. The only thing I didn't remove was that bracket on the back of that because it's too risky to do that. And this piece we're not going to reinstall. We'll just keep it with the motor. That's that. Alright, let's get started on cleaning everything up. So as you get ready to clean something like this, you really have to be conscientious of what cleaners that you're using so that you don't damage any more, like the gold pinch striping or anything like that. So if you look over here, in this container I just got some soap and water, got some baking soda, got this cleaner here called LA's Totally Awesome. It's a pretty gentle cleaner, does a good job. Neverdol to polish our Japanning a little bit when we're done, and Gojo, which is also a pretty gentle cleaner. So what we're going to do is we're going to start out with the Gojo. We're just going to put some on there. We're not going to put it all over the windings, but we'll put it all over the Japan finish and just use that. Let it sit on there for a few minutes to kind of take off the heavy gunk. And then once we remove that, we'll go in there and we'll use either the dish soap or the Totally Awesome. I'll probably try the Totally Awesome first, and then we'll see how they come from there. Baking soda is another gentle cleaner. You know, I just got a variety out here, so we're just going to try them and see how it goes. Alright, we got that coated with the Gojo. Just going to let that sit on there for 10-15 minutes and do its thing, and then we'll wipe it off and we'll see where we're at. Okay, now that the Gojo is set up, we're just kind of using this Totally Awesome to rinse it off. And then, getting in there, this is a real soft brush. Just getting in there. I mean, there's not much left of that gold pinstripe, but we're trying to preserve what we can. It is what it is. So we're just going to go around and gently clean that until we got all the caked up grease off of there. Then I'm going to give this thing a real light rinse off in some cool water. After it dries, then we'll start polishing up the Japanning finish with the Neverdol. Okay, we gave that a quick rinse off in some cool water. Now I'm going to wrap it up in the heating pad, let that thing completely dry out. Alright, it's drying out with the heating pad and the blanket wrapped around it, swaddled up like a little baby. So after that dries, we'll start with the Neverdol. So I'm giving the thing a light going over with the Neverdol, just trying to clean up that Japanning, and then once it's clean, I'll give it a coat of paste wax. This, if you look here, you know, there's almost nothing left of those gold remnants on there. I mean, we knew that going in. It's very hard to read. Even after being cleaned up, it's still hard to read. This motor is probably a candidate for refinishing, but I just don't feel comfortable refinishing a historical piece like this. The original finish on these was Japanning, and I know how to do that. If you look back at my channel, you'll see where I did like a Holzer cabinet motor. I mean, I do know how to Japan it, but it's only original once. So for my purposes, I just want to leave it be, and I'll just accept it the way it is. But if somebody was to come along and say, hey, you know, I'm going to refinish that, you couldn't really fault them for it, because this is right on the fence. But anyways, we're going to carry on. Going to clean it up with the Neverdol, give it a coat of paste wax, and we'll keep on going from there. Let's get the tripod reattached, and then we'll continue cleaning it from there. Good. Now keep on cleaning it. All right, on our brass and copper pieces, we want to give these about a 50% cleaning. What I mean by that is we want to freshen them up and remove the heavy grease, things like that, but we don't want to polish them and make them look too shiny where they won't blend in with the worn and chipped up finish of the rest of the motor. So we're going to clean and freshen these up, but not going to get carried away. So if you're going to get serious about these restorations, you definitely want to have this in your arsenal. It's called a carding wheel. See how I put my finger on that and it didn't tear my finger up? It's a nice, very fine steel wheel. It's perfect for just cleaning up these pieces without putting a high gloss on them, as opposed to using the regular wire wheel or a fiber wheel or a buffing pad or something like that. This is perfect for that. I got this on an antique motor, using it to clean up another antique motor, so that's cool in itself. So we're just going to come in here and just give these a light touch like that, and we're still leaving a little bit of the patina on there. These carding wheels are indispensable. It's perfect right there. Okay, it's clean, but it's still got the character. We're going to clean up all these other pieces in the exact same fashion using the carding wheel. I don't think I need to show me cleaning every piece. You get the idea. Alright, some of these insulating pieces you got to be careful when you clean them, like these knobs right here and these washers, which look to be made out of mica. We're just going to clean those by hand, because if you try to clean them with the wheel or anything, you'll break them. Alright, this area in here, I gave it a light cleaning with the Scotch-Brite pad just to remove that surface rust. What I'm doing just in here and in here, I'm going to put just a light coat of dull coat on there. In the world of clear coats that come in the can, if you need a dull finish, this Testors product is the absolute best there is. It's a little stinky, but it's by far better than any of the other products out there, like the Rust-Oleum or any of those. So I'm just putting a little bit in the cap. Take it on my brush and just carefully just coat that inside surface right there. This will be completely invisible when this dries, so it'll just be between me and you. Perfect right there. And that dull coat will just provide some protection so that rust doesn't come back up there in the future. Alright, so we need to re-insulate these windings just to provide a little bit of protection. Some of these bare copper wires right here, you can see where the clear coat is kind of cracking off them a little bit. So these two products I have here are specifically made to protect the windings of electric motors. That's what they're designed for. Okay, they're both fantastic products. I use them both regularly. But this one has an obnoxious red color, and it would look terrible if you put that on those windings. You would have to repaint them black or brown or something after you were finished to hide that. So this one, although it's a great product, is out. This one, which I use most of the time, is Spray-On EL600 Clear. Okay, it's an aerosol, and it works great. It just air dries clear, good product. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this, I'm just going to spray it into a plastic cap, and even though it's an aerosol, I'm just going to kind of brush it on there, and that'll provide some more protection for these windings. These are clear wires right here. In other words, these do not have any cloth insulation on them, and you could see where the insulation, where the varnish is kind of fractured on that. So we want to give that support by putting another coat of insulating varnish on there. And over here, on this side, okay, right here, this little piece of insulation was there to provide a little abrasion resistance where that wire bends at that angle right there, and that's brittle and broke off. So we're going to replace that, and we're also going to put a piece of insulation inside this hole
where this wire runs through, so that we don't have a situation where the insulation on that wire wears off rubbing against this metal housing. But we'll do that in a later step. So let me get these windings coated up. Brush wet. Just gonna go in real carefully. Brush that on there. Nice liberal coating. I'll probably put 2 or 3 coats of this on there. All right, let me finish this up and bring you guys back. You get the idea. I'm going to coat this whole thing up, do it about 3 times. Alright, so we need a small piece of replacement wire for that wire that fell off, and I think I'm going to use this one right here. I mentioned before I have a little collection of antique wiring. Packard's my favorite, but I got some other kinds in there. Anyways, they come in handy for projects like this where you're trying to use original cloth covered wiring. So the original wire is on the right, our replacement wire is on the left. It's about the same size. So what we need to do is, I've got my heat gun out here. I'm going to warm this wire up, which will make it easier to work with because it does get a little stiff after a while. But once you warm it up, it'll be more flexible. I'm going to strip off a piece because we only need the insulation. And then we're going to slide the insulation up there, put a dab of glue on that, and replace it right there where it was. Same thing in here, this hole right here. Going to cut a piece of insulation to fit. We'll slide it up there. We'll put a dab of glue on that to hold it in place. Alright, so we got one there, and we got that one down there. Now we're going to move on to cleaning the armature. Alright, we're going to hit the armature with just a little bit of compressed air. That's not too strong, just to blow off the loose stuff. And then the rest of it we're going to use our QD electronic cleaner and a fine brush. Just clean that off a little bit. Alright, so I got the armature chucked up in the south bin, and I'm using a 1/4 inch collet to secure that shaft. The shaft is just under a 1/4 inch. I actually had to put a piece of tape around it just so it would get some bite in that collet. The threads on the shaft look to be about 28 threads per inch, and when you're cleaning up an old armature like that, a lot of times, like on your bigger motors, okay, you'll take a little cut off the commutator to clean it up a little bit in the lathe. But on an old one like this, you absolutely do not want to take a skim cut on this armature. You just want to polish it up with some sandpaper or something like that, because these things, the way that these are secured on there, it's not a real strong setup. And if you start cutting it, when you hit it with your cutting tool, you run the risk that these things are going to pop off of there, and then you're going to have a real problem. So on a real old one like this, these small ones, just polish it up by with some paper, and don't try to take a cut with the lathe. I recommend not doing that. And then I'll run I got a 1/4 28 tap, be the closest one to that. We'll try to clean up those threads a little bit. Not really going to use them anyway, but just so that they look a little bit better. And let's get started. So that's running nice right there. Not running real fast, but we're not in a rush. Now we're just going to come in here. This is 320 grit. Give that light cleaning. Okay, nothing major. That's as far as we're going to polish that. Those copper type brushes, they cause a lot more wear on a commutator than a carbon brush would. So there's still a couple little faint lines in there, but we're just going to leave that. I don't want to take too much material off there. So this is blast the contact cleaner. Make sure we didn't leave any grit behind. Looks good right there. Now we're going to back off the tailstock to manually. I got a 28 tooth per inch die right here. I'm just going to put
that on there by hand and just kind of clean up those threads a little bit. The shaft is not exactly a 1/4 inch, but it's close enough for what we're doing. I masked off the shaft and the commutator areas, and I gave that thing a couple nice coats of the insulating varnish. So that's looking great. We'll just let that dry. Starting a little reassembly here. Starting with this back bearing journal. Just screws in, and this stop here screws on top of it to secure it in position, putting it back about where it was before. That's about it right there. I took a tweezers and I carefully placed the bearings back into the journal. In order to lubricate it, I'm using this grease, this Magna Lube, which is fortified with Teflon. It's an excellent grease. It's a little pricey, but it works really good. So now we're going to drop that armature back in there. Let's drop that armature back in there. Hopefully you can see that. Move on the shaft here. Now, we're going to carefully get in there. Boom, just like that. Okay, perfect. So if you look at the way that the armature is resting in there, you can see that the armature is approximately centered on this. And that adjustment is made by screwing the bearing journal in or out. So I'm going to leave it right there. That looks about right. So we could adjust that if we need to, but that looks to be about correct right there. Before we start any project, we always take a few photos, and they came in handy right here. For example, I counted how many threads were exposed on these bearing journals before we put it back together. And at first, when I put it back together, I had this flipped in the other direction. It'll fit either way, but the armature is better centered when it's in this configuration. So that's fine right there. We got the end of that wire cleaned up a little bit, so it should make good contact. Get that back in there like that. Right there. We still need to fabricate another brush to look just like that one. And we need to work on our wiring, getting that hooked up. So far, I think it looks great. I cobbled that brush together with some copper sheets I already had on hand. The original is mic'd out at about 10 thou, and the sheets I had on hand, I had one sheet at 8 thou and one sheet of 13. So I used the 8, that should be close enough because no reason to buy that, I'll just use what I got. So we're getting down to the short rows on this project, and now that we have the motor clean and it's well waxed to provide some rust protection, now what I'm doing, believe it or not, is I'm actually applying another coat of wax. This will be the final coat, and this is called stove polish. It's actually made for potbelly stoves. And the reason why I'm using this wax is, number one, it's black in color, which is great for kind of blending in the areas that don't have the japanning to the areas that do. And number two, and more importantly, is this is actually a low luster wax, as opposed to before when the piece was shiny. I got the wax on there, I haven't wiped it off yet, I gotta let it dry. What I'm trying to do now is I'm actually trying to dull it down a little bit. Anytime that you have a restoration where you have a lot of paint loss like you do on this one, you never want the thing to be too shiny, because what that does is that highlights the discrepancy between the areas that are missing the paint and the areas that have the paint. In this case, it's japanning and not paint, but it's the same principle. So by applying this low luster stove polish as our final coat, that's going to dull this thing way down, and it'll have a more uniform appearance when that's buffed out, and that's what we're looking for. So then when that's done, I think it's going to look a lot better. It'll look more even. It's going to look old, but it'll be fresh, and that's what we're shooting for. After our stove polish coating, I took just a light bit of weathering chalks and just knocked off any other sheen that was on there. I think it looks great now. I know it seems counterintuitive to clean something up and then to re-weather it, so to speak, but as I mentioned before, anytime that you have a lot of paint loss, you're better off to go with a duller finish than you are to try to leave it shiny. I think this looks fantastic. It looks old, but it's fresh and it's clean. You know, it looks like it's old and well maintained, and that's what we're shooting for right there. So really, if you look at it, you know, if I didn't tell you that we took it apart and cleaned everything up, you know, you wouldn't really know it. You know, it looks like it's just a nice preserved condition, and that's what we're shooting for. So now we need to get it mounted on the base and give it a test run.
I'm making up a little wooden base for the motor and a small switch to sit on, and I had a scrap piece of wood that had some holes in it. At first I thought this was like teak or ipe or something like that. It's an extremely hard wood, but let's look at the end grain on that. Is that not unbelievable? I mean, this is a real dense and heavy wood, so I'm not exactly sure what it is, but I had just enough good material out of that scrap wood for the motor to fit here and the switch to fit here. So that's what we're going to use. We're just going to hit that with some boiled linseed oil, and it's already beautiful just the way it is. Alright, we're working on our base for this thing. I had to pre-drill out these holes because this wood is so tough. Can't get a screw in there. Got the stock set on the drill press.
Got a little knife switch mounted there. Looks nice. Originally, of course, this motor would have been running on batteries. It was originally supplied with 4 Lalonde cells, and they came in like ceramic jars. There was 4 of them that were like in a little wooden case, and that would have been running this originally. And those batteries were supposed to run this motor for like, I think, between 125 and 150 hours, which was pretty impressive for the time. But anyways, for our purposes, we'll be running this thing on a variable DC power supply whenever we feel like running it. Here it is running on about 4 volts. I did run it on a 9-volt battery, and it's perfectly fine. The wire gauge on this thing is more than adequate to handle a 9-volt battery, but Traditionally, it would have been running a little bit less than that. And if I bring the phone up here, okay, listen how quiet that thing is running. I mean, you could actually hear the DC power supply more than you hear the motor. A lot of videos where you see these C-frame motors online, they sound like meat grinders. And I know that some people change out the ball bearings in there for Teflon bearings and this and that. But what I did was I spent the time to properly adjust the rotor so that it's in the optimum position for smooth running. And those are the original bearings still in there. And it's really nice and quiet. I mentioned in the beginning of the video that it's beyond the scope of what we're doing here to debate the merits of Edison's business practices and things like that. You know, everybody who's done any studying on him knows that, you know, he used a lot of patents that were originally brought forth by other folks, and he refined them and brought them to market, and things like that. You know, he was a businessman. Anyways, this piece is no exception to that. And if you're interested in learning more about the origins of this piece and its manufacture, there's a couple names that I'll give you that you can research. One is named Charles Lieb, L-I-E-B, and another guy, and more importantly, is named Charles Van de Poele, and that's V-A-N-D-E-P-O-E-L-E. And Van de Poele, okay, he had some early patents for this kind of motor that were eventually sold to Thomson Houston, and then Edison purchased the rights to those. And if you look at his early patents, it does appear that Edison used some of those elements when he produced this motor. So if you're a history buff and you're interested in learning a little bit more about it, check those guys out. Anyways, we're going to wrap this video up. I hope that you enjoyed following along on the conservation of this beautiful piece. We'll see you next time. Thank you very much for watching.